that they say that Juan Orlando Hernandez, myself, is not a man we can work with. It's not someone who can be bought off, not someone who can be manipulated, not someone who can be intimidated. They say that they can't even try to come close to me because they say that I'm inaccessible. They say that it would be extremely risky. They say that I was aloof and distant. The criminals understood that they had a serious problem with me. These are striking messages in the recordings, but it's very unlikely that in 2014, when we took office, Honduras was the most violent country in the world and the most unequal country in the region. Now, just a few months before the end of our term in office, I can say with great satisfaction that Honduras today is a very different country.
His Excellency Juan Orlando Hernandez Alvarado, President of the Republic of Honduras, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Señor Presidente.
President, Secretary General, heads of state, heads of delegation, I would like to greet you all from Honduras. Since 2014, we have brought to this forum relevant issues such as the severe impact of climate change on our countries, the low coffee prices in the world, the role of organized crime, gangs, as destabilizers of democratic governments, and injustice that has also been seen in the distribution of vaccines. All of our requests have been fair. Today, the entire world is facing a pandemic that has brought us to our knees. COVAX had serious problems at the beginning to ensure the distribution of vaccines to all member states. A critical moment when our lives were on the line. This shows the importance of the World Health Organization in reacting. But they were not prepared to cope with the scale of the emergency. I suggest that we need to transform the World Health System, especially the WHO, as a result of the inequality that has been seen in the distribution of COVID vaccines to developing countries. In spite of the fact that money was available, we weren't able to have access to the vaccines in time. An emergency fund needed to be set up with the support of donors and countries to guarantee equitable access and timely access to vaccines or indeed to any other kind of treatment. 2020 was undoubtedly a catastrophic year for Honduras. In addition to the pandemic, we were struck by two very destructive hurricanes. They destroyed our crops and our road infrastructure was severely affected. Thousands of homes were destroyed and unfortunately dozens of Hondurans lost their lives. According to ECLAC and the Central Bank of Honduras in their studies, they estimated that there was a loss of $4 billion as a result of these hurricanes, which would not be an insignificant sum for even a rich country, but for us it is equivalent to 30% of our GDP. It left more than 445,000 Hondurans without a job. As we are one of the countries that is most affected by droughts, destructive rains in the entire world, in spite of the fact that we are one of the nations that has contributed to conserving nature the most, 50% of our land is in fact covered by forests. In spite of all of this, however, we are most affected, one of the most affected countries by climate change. We have a plan to grapple with climate change that consists of collecting rainwater fit for human consumption, and also by boosting intelligent agriculture and boosting productivity. We are changing the way in which we carry out agriculture, using less land and ensuring that we care for forests. The Green Climate Funds, as you know, are not reaching countries as they should. But what is lacking here is political will. Ladies and gentlemen, it was time to act a while ago, and we still don't understand why that didn't happen. In Mexico, recently at the CELAC summit, I suggested the establishment of a climate change center, and I will do the same here and in Glasgow. We need to ensure that countries honor their commitments through the green funds to get rid of bureaucracy and to ensure that we can have mitigation and adaptation, and also address the emergency of countries that are affected annually by this phenomenon. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, when we took office, Honduras was the most violent country in the world and the most unequal country in the region. Most small and medium-sized companies couldn't access credit. Infrastructure had been neglected for half a century, and people were without hope. There was a lack of stability. Now, just a few months before the end of our term in office, I can say with great satisfaction that Honduras today is a very different country. In spite of the major disasters and crises that we have had to grapple with, today we have some of the best macroeconomic figures in the region, thanks to the sound management of finances. Institutions such as the IMF have been supporting the transparency with which funds have been managed. And this has allowed us to access credit easily at a low interest rate. And this directly helps people through social programs, for instance. We also continue to roll out major infrastructure, more than has ever been done before. We have been trying to fulfill the dream of uniting the Atlantic and the Pacific, a dream that has taken 200 years to fulfill. We are modernizing our airports and our ports. Now the Palmerona airport is a significant development. Today we can speak about significant manufacturing growth to the tune of 70%. So we've entered a new era in terms of industry with modern infrastructure and to produce modern textiles. We have been able to roll out modern infrastructure to provide efficient and comprehensive support to our citizens. This for current generations and also for future generations. We have done all this in a transparent way, working hard with all of our administration over the last 8 years. We have invested the resources of the Honduran people with transparency and diligently over our term in office. We've also been working with Transparency International in at least 4 areas of government. We created the first support mission to combat corruption and impunity in the history of the Organization of American States, and now we are working in terms of combating corruption and crime with the United Nations Office. We also set up the Transparency Unit. We have strengthened organizations for the service of people to ensure that we save people's lives. One of the most significant sectors for us has been tourism, generating more than 270,000 jobs, because our country has an enormous potential to be exploited in this area. We have focused on international tourism. Now we receive some of the largest cruise liners in the world. For the first time in history, those who were overlooked for many years in Honduras are supported with dignity through the Better Life program, which has helped more than 6.7 million people with 41,000 benefits, including housing benefits, including the complete construction of houses, and also through capital and credits to allow people to set up their own business, to be their own boss, to generate their own jobs. A better life ultimately means dignity for Hondurans. A better life ultimately means social justice. Just look at the impact. According to ECLAC data, we have been able to reduce the poverty level by 7% in the country before the pandemic. With this program, we have been able to lessen the impact of the hurricanes and aid our recovery. We have been able to invest in the social side of the economy, accounting for 70% of jobs, and we have very low credits at very low rate. We have also received historic support, which has allowed us to transform our countryside and our agriculture with 5% credits available for those working in the sector. Never before had these rates been seen in our country. We have built more than 46,000 houses, more than all of the previous governments. Today we are continuing with this change to ensure greater security, more infrastructure, more support for jobs, for social programs, for those who had previously been overlooked. We are delivering a better Honduras. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a new issue that I'm obliged to raise here that affects many governments who, like Honduras, are involved in the international fight against drug trafficking. To understand this issue, we have to recall that a few decades ago, Honduras had the highest homicide rate in the world, and we were the country where most of the drugs destined to the United States passed through. In 2010, we decided to approve a range of security laws to crack down on drug traffickers. If you look at the measures, we can see who is who, because these kinds of actions, for instance through extradition, these will only be taken, and nobody linked to the drug trafficking will ever again be able to take these measures. We have taken extraordinary measures which have been recognized by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and by our allies in the world. According to official statistics from the United States government, which are reported by the Department of State, since I came to the presidency, Honduras has been able to reduce drug transit through its territory by 96%, which is an almost unprecedented achievement. Here you can see the map and the difference between 2010 and the more recent time. My government, through the extradition of 44 drug traffickers in the custody of the United States, we have been able to dismantle the major cartels. This is a deep transformation Almost half of the police before were implicated in similar crimes, but we ensured that action was taken to build a new police force which now enjoys confidence and is seen as a beacon of trust in the region. Most importantly, we have been able to reduce the homicide rate by almost 70%, which has saved thousands and thousands of lives every year. Recently, we have been able to make significant progress. If you listen to civil servants from Honduras and our allies, such as the Department of Justice, the FBI, the United States, countries such as Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and of course the United States, the United Nations. Now, in addition to this, there is a new element. Several revealing documents, which are available to all, and of interest both to the authorities and to historians, adding to the real history of the criminals. There are secret recordings of the Honduran drug traffickers that are now available. And I have transcripts here. They're public documents. In 2013, there was a secret meeting of various drug traffickers, and it's interesting to read the transcript of the conversations. These are transcripts which are publicly available and are now being used in judicial proceedings. The writers of the film available on Netflix are studying these transcripts because it is extremely revealing to look at how these drug traffickers work behind the scenes, describing their reality between them. The recordings show that the drug traffickers weren't able to work or negotiate with me. On the contrary, they knew it would be absolutely impossible. They even discussed how they could assassinate me. On a recording from the 3rd of December 2013, after the elections, when they knew that I would be the next president, they said, "Now they're going to defeat us." End of quotation. They used a different, more vulgar word than I've quoted here, but ultimately that was the meaning of what they were saying. They knew that with me as president, they would not be able to survive. And they were right. Although my government was informed about these issues, after I took office, those involved in the recordings ended up in prison. Later on, in September 2014, the FBI and the ambassador of the United States in my country informed my government and me personally of the plans of serial killers and their Honduran sponsors to assassinate me. And here is the note that was sent to our ambassador in Washington. We were able to avoid these crimes. The criminals were captured and they were brought to justice in Honduras. What the audio recording shows is that they had no kind of hope or protection given that I was the president. In 2013, given the policy that I had rolled out since 2010, they were very worried about what was going on, by how we were cracking down on drug trafficking. And so they were contacting Mexican serial killers to see how I could be assassinated. the recording shows that they say that Juan Orlando Hernandez, myself, is not a man we can work with. It's not someone who can be bought off, not someone who can be manipulated, not someone who can be intimidated. On several occasions, they say that they can't even try to come close to me because they say that I'm inaccessible. They say that it would be extremely risky. They say that I was aloof and distant. I'm saying this because that word wasn't correctly interpreted at the time. The criminals understood that they had a serious problem with me. These are striking messages in the recordings, but it's very unlikely that even you have seen a lot of information about these transcripts, in spite of the fact that these revelations have shown the false allegations of the criminals to be completely baseless. When the media eventually provide information about the transcripts, they will say secret transcripts disavow the secret plans of the drug traffickers. Given that they lied under oath, they were guilty of perjury. They provided false testimony in court. And they did so in the hope of obtaining benefits, favorable treatment, and ultimately to seek revenge. A very important element is that they violated an absolute condition to receive any kind of benefit in the US justice system. In addition, the behavior of the drug traffickers refutes their own false testimony. These criminals, when they provided their initial statements, they never mentioned, at no point did they mention any kind of protection. Never did they mention that I received any money. Of course, it's quite strange that years later they changed their version of the story entirely to affirm the absolute opposite. When a dozen drug traffickers more decided that with me as president they had no hope in Honduras at all, and the only option was to abandon their criminal empires, that they would be subjected to a foreign prison. Their only hope was to try and seek an arrangement. Then their behavior speaks louder than any kind of lie that they now give in the courts. The reason that I am raising this issue, and I believe it is relevant for many member states of the UN, and the reason why I think that the international media will eventually get round to providing information about it, is because there is an important issue that must be addressed, and is much bigger than Honduras or any other country. If the drug traffickers receive benefits for giving a false testimony, what do they hope to receive in return? And apparently they were led to believe that they would obtain benefits. So this is the issue. In a nutshell, if killers such as these people, major drug traffickers who have confessed to at least 78 killings, including homicides and other crimes committed, if they can obtain benefits in exchange for providing false testimony, the system for international cooperation will not be sustainable, because it would introduce systematic corruption in the judicial process, and it would mean betraying the allies who risked their life in this struggle. If perjury is provided recompense by the US, if criminals can use false testimony with impunity in a federal court, this would mean putting dangerous weapons in the hands of a mortal enemy, confessed serial killers, to be used against the most effective members of the alliance to deal with transnational crime. If the authorities in the allies of the United States realize that the killers could receive benefits from the US government after committing perjury, then there would be the real, genuine danger that in countries throughout the world there would be a loss of confidence, leading to a collapse in cooperation. And this would jeopardize the interests of any countries who, like Honduras, is committed to stamping out drug trafficking. And it would also dishonor the brave heroes who sacrificed their lives in this battle. The thousands of innocent people who lost their lives, and all of the governments and institutions who put their faith in a crucial international alliance. Nevertheless, allow me to stress that I trust that ultimately the United States will not provide any kind of reward to those giving false testimony. We have seen, for instance, that after the drug trafficking gave false testimony in a federal trial in New York, alleging that Honduran militants were helping them, the commander of the Southern Command flew to Honduras, and in a public ceremony he presented the highest ranking commander with an important reward, and this was a powerful demonstration that lies should not be rewarded. Similarly, after other false testimony in New York, the highest leadership of the LATINA group invited me and my drug trafficking team to meet with them in Washington, where there was a strong public statement given that the President of Honduras are trustworthy partners and effective partners in the fight against drug trafficking. When we began our struggle, we had effective relations with the Obama-Biden administration and subsequently with the next administration. Working with then Vice President Biden, we saw how committed he was to this struggle. And this was also reflected in the Alliance for the Northern Triangle. Today I can say to you that my government will always, as always, continue its effective international cooperation until my last day as President in January 2022. We are leaving succeeding generations a safer Honduras with hope and a future. Finally, I would like to express optimism that the achievements that have transformed my country will provide more and better opportunities for our people. And I am certain that the next governments will be able to do likewise, or even better. And this will be of benefit for us, for our generation, and for the forthcoming generations too. Warm greetings to you all from the Honduran people. Thank you very much.